Merlin Sports.
Hey everyone, this is Phenomenon from Merlin Sports. And with me tonight to discuss the Eastern Conference NHL preview is D-Dog. How are you, sir?
I'm well, my friend. How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing good. I'm excited. I can't wait for the playoffs. All the matchups are now settled. And so we could dive right into the Eastern Conference. NHL playoffs return this Saturday and Sunday. We have some juicy matchups, and we have some, especially in the East, we have teams that we haven't seen in the playoffs in a quick minute. So, some new blood injected into the playoff tree. So I'm just going to rhyme off all the series, and then we'll circle back, and we'll probably start with the top team. So. Eastern Conference, we have from the Atlantic Division winners, the Toronto Maple Leafs, hosting the first wild card, which is the Ottawa Senators, and one of those teams we haven't seen in a while in the playoffs. Then we have two familiar foes in the Battle of the Sunshine State, Tampa Bay Lightning hosting Florida Panthers. And in the other division, the Metropolitan Division, the number one team, which happened to be the number one team in the Eastern Conference overall, the Washington Capitals. And they will host the last team to clinch their spot in the playoffs and the last wild card, the Montreal Canadiens. And we haven't seen them in a while. And also the other matchup in the Metropolitan pits the Carolina Hurricanes, who finished second, and they'll be hosting the New Jersey Devils, who return to the playoffs this year. So let's start with Washington being the number one seed and probably the team with the biggest storyline this year in Ovechkin getting the all-time goals record. They had a shot at the President's Trophy, and they fell just short. They've kind of cooled down a little bit since Ovechkin got the record, and they will face a very upstart Montreal Canadiens team who, kind of ending the season on a heater just to make the playoffs, and probably will be one of the most home friendly arenas in the league, the Bell Center, which will give Montreal, it's electric there, even during the regular season. So I think they're going to be electric for their team, Montreal. So this is an interesting matchup. And why don't you start with what you think is going to happen?
Yeah. No, I was saying that I think Washington, they won the Eastern Conference this year. They surprised a lot of people. I don't think a lot of people had predicted them to win that division. The New York Rangers kind of fell off the map because I think that was a lot of people's pick, with Igor Shesterkin. But the Capitals had a great year. Logan Thompson played phenomenal in net. He had a concussion toward the end of the season, and that's important for how Washington's going to play because they've struggled to keep the puck out of the net since he's been on ice for the last few games. But I like Washington to win this series. Montreal. If you looked at the beginning of the season, they were probably picked to finish in around the likes of Buffalo, the Columbus Blue Jackets, although they were inspired by what happened to Johnny Gaudreau. But those kind of bottom-feeding teams in Montreal has kind of sprung up and surprised them. Martin St. Louis has done a great job, and if not for Washington's season, he might be in line for Coach of the Year, Marty St. Louis, with what's happened with Montreal, because I don't think a lot of people thought Montreal would even challenge for a playoff spot, never mind make the playoffs. But I like Washington win this probably 5-6 at the most. I don't see Montreal surprising and beating Washington. Now, having said that, if Thompson can't come back, they got more than a shot of winning this series. The high of Ovechkin's goal scoring race has kind of tapered off the Capitals' drive. But yeah, I like the Capitals to win this series, though.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be a great series, I think. Even though it's basically 1 versus 8. We haven't, last year Washington just barely squeaked into the playoffs, and they had even they have a negative goal differential. So for them to go from the 8th seed to the 1st seed in 1 year, yeah, it's been amazing. And also to follow along with the goal chase. But I think you mentioned it, and it's like they fell off a little bit after that goal chase, and like how could you not, right? That's such an emotional high for the team that it's almost like you pause to take a breather, and in that pause to catch their breath. I think they have not been playing really great hockey lately, and that's a little bit concerning because you do want to go into the playoffs playing as well to form as you can. So I think Washington dropped off a bit, and then, like you said, Logan Thompson injury concerns. Although their backup Charlie Lindgren is proven to be a capable goalie, we don't know what that will look like in the postseason. And I mean, if you follow hockey, Montreal being one of the original 6 franchises, and that franchise used to have like a lot of magic around it, and of course lead in cups overall. And we've seen previous editions of Montreal's Canadian teams that were not necessarily that good in the regular season, but absolutely catch lightning in a bottle. And I'm talking about the COVID shortened season where they weren't expected to go all the way to the finals. So they sometimes they can have a good fortune on their side. However, and if you go back to several other, it happens like once a decade for Montreal. The constant factor in all those is they've had a goalie that's absolutely caught fire, whether it's Carey Price or Jose Theodore, or go back to the 80s with Patrick Roy. And I do not see that happening this year with Sam Montalban and the other backup. I think it's a feel-good story. Montreal makes the playoffs. Their players will get experience. But I think even with the warts that I said Washington had, they will pull it together to at least get past Montreal. So I like Washington's defeat. Pretty. I think Montreal will put up some resistance, but they just will be outmatched in the end. So I like Washington take this series possibly in 6 games, and we can move on over to basically the winner of that Washington-Montreal series will face the winner of Carolina and New Jersey. And here we have 2 teams that are kind of, I don't want to say limping into the playoffs, but they haven't really been playing their best hockey lately. So what's your analysis of this series?
It is interesting series. It's a tight series, but I like Carolina to win this series. Carolina, they've been close the last couple of years. They ran into Igor Shesterkin, who's been one of the best goalies in the world, and literally they should have won last year. They should have beat the Rangers last year. Shesterkin was the only reason why they didn't. I know they've lost some players. They didn't address their goaltending. They still have the goaltending problem with Frederik Andersen but they had this thing with Raikkonen that they thought they were gonna sign him and add him to the team for this playoff drive, but he didn't want to sign, so they traded him away again to Dallas. But Rod Brind'Amour is one of the best coaches in the league, and he's going to have his team ready. I think they'll get to New Jersey. I think it's important to note that New Jersey's coached by Sheldon Keefe. He knows what it's like to lose in the first round. So I think, but having said that, playoffs, and you mentioned it in the Montreal-Washington series, right? Goaltending, and Markstrom has been fantastic for New Jersey down the stretch. So, he gives them a chance. He's done that before in Calgary. When he was in Calgary, he played really well in the playoffs as well. But to me, I think Carolina is like is a little bit like Winnipeg, a little bit like Toronto, in terms of they are really about the playoffs. It's not about what they do in the regular season. They've shown that they can win a lot of games in the regular season, but they haven't shown that they can get past and get to the playoffs. Now, this is a franchise that has won a Stanley Cup, so it's not like they don't know how to win a Stanley Cup, but they haven't shown it in the playoffs. They've run into hot goaltending. They haven't had the same type of goaltending. That hot goaltending is not in front of them right now. Maybe Markstrom gets hot, but he's nowhere near Igor Shesterkin. So, yeah, I like Carolina to pull out and beat the New Jersey Devils.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. I think this will be a close series, and I think you touched on one of the key matchups, which is goaltending, where I think we both agree that New Jersey has the advantage in net with Markstrom against the twosome that Carolina could put out there. And through that debacle, what Rantanen, getting Rantanen, not being able to sign him and trading him, they made their team worse because they had to, they gave up Martin Necas to Colorado as a result, and they didn't even get to keep the trade acquisition for very long that they got in return, and had to bail on him. So, like, on paper, they're worse. I do like Rod Brindamore, and it's a hard. Just the team kind of adopts a little of his personality, which is a hardworking team. So they are a good skating, hardworking team. I think they take a lot of shots. If you watch them, you'll see they shoot a lot. They take a lot of shots on the net. Jersey is good. Like, they have good players. They're pretty decent. They've you have to check on the health of some players. I heard Dougie Hamilton's coming back on defense, so certainly help. And in a closely fought series, I like Carolina to come out on top. And I'm not that super confident in it because the goaltending matchup is so clearly on New Jersey's side, but I just think Carolina is a little bit more well balanced and well coached to maybe kind of nullify that somewhat. So I too like Carolina coming out of that.
It's interesting because I just pulled up some of the stats and stuff like that. Carolina has a losing record on away from home. They have an incredible home record. New Jersey's not really good at home. They're barely above 500, and their road record's pretty good for a team. They were 23-16. So interesting to see how it shapes out in terms of home and away.
Yeah,
right.
I think what we're going to see is a close series with probably every game being close.
Yep.
So. Okay, well, let's move over to the Atlantic Division. And here we have the division-winning Toronto Maple Leafs hosting the Ottawa Senators in the Battle of Ontario, which was last contested in 2004. And you were always guaranteed a great series back then. And I think we're probably in for another great one this time around. So what are your thoughts on the Battle of Ontario and who will ultimately come out?
Well, it's interesting because Ottawa's owned Toronto in the regular season. right? They've owned Toronto. But here's the thing that Toronto, this is what they've played all season for. And it's they've had the opportunity to play playoff type hockey the last month because they were battling for first place in the Atlantic. I think as much as Ottawa is up and coming young team and they're in, and it's a Battle of Ontario, which is gonna make it a very close series. The Leafs did not want to play Tampa or Florida, so they were working to make sure they didn't play that and let the bloodbath of that series come out. I like the Leafs. I've heard 7 games. I'm going to say the Leafs in 6. I think at some point you can win too much. And Ottawa has got like a streak going. I think they've won like 5 or 6 games in a row against Toronto. And at some point you're going to you can't win. You can't win that many straight. So, and the Leafs have a lot to prove. Like, let's face it, they have a huge amount of stuff to prove. They went to the playoffs 9 years in a row, and they have not won. They've won 1 playoff series.
All right, so they've made it to the second round once in 9 seasons.
Right, so they have a lot to prove with this core. They got 2 major free agents coming out of the core. So I like the Leafs. I think their goaltending is solid. Ottawa's got good goaltending as well. Don't get me wrong, but Allmark didn't play in the playoffs, right? Neither did Stolar. So both of them kind of watched.
Actually, it's interesting because last year Allmark got in against for Boston against Toronto, and actually, Toronto was able to score on him last year, which is why Boston ultimately was Swayman in the net. They got rid of the platoon real quick once they saw how Allmark performed. But he's had a really good year in Ottawa. Like that, he's a good goalie. I mean, he's a former Vezina winner, so he's a solid goalie. Okay, so you're liking the Leafs
yes, I like the Leafs in a hard fought tight series, but I'll say go 6.
Okay, yeah, I think this is. I think that this is not a good matchup for Toronto. I mean, stylistically, because Ottawa, with the likes of Brady Tkachuk, have they'll play a way to kind of nullify the Leafs' speed and skill game and kind of muck it up. Guys like Brady Tkachuk making it hard for the Leafs star players. So stylistically, it's not a great matchup for the Leafs. And, Ottawa's won every matchup during the regular season. However, I think playoffs will be different. This version of the Leafs, they have similar results, 100-point plus team, but I think we can agree, like, they look a bit different this year, right? Like with Craig Berube kind of trying to cement his coaching style and his philosophy into the roster. I think it's taken time, but you can see a difference in first of all, the Leafs roster with guys like Tanev and getting those players that kind of sacrifice their body, whether it's blocking shots or throwing their weight around. And then also, like last year, it was like Matthews was chasing 70 goals, and it just, I'm not sure that they were super focused on the postseason, whereas I think Berube has them focused on the postseason, and I think we'll see probably a better version of Toronto, just based on being more built for the playoffs. And also, the big thing is like, when was the last time Leafs out of these 9 years, this is the best goaltending tandem in those 9 years, and they are going into the playoffs both playing at a high level. So for these reasons, I like the Leafs to take care of the Ottawa Senators. But Ottawa is not going to be a pushover. They'll make life difficult. And Leafs will have to earn every goal. But ultimately, I think Leafs come out of this in about 6 games. So that would leave the winner of that series would face the winner of the Battle of Florida, which is Tampa Bay Lightning hosting the Florida Panthers. And Tampa Bay pulled out home ice, and they looked stronger down the stretch. And Florida got hit by the injury bug and rested a lot of their regulars. They're expecting to have Matthew Tkachuk back for the start of the playoffs, although I haven't seen the official announcement, but that's expected to come back. Ekblad, I think, is eligible in Game 3 or something. He's facing coming off a suspension. And also Brad Marchand, their trade acquisition, he got back the last handful of games, so they should be trending towards better health, but something to keep an eye on as the playoff games get closer. So maybe I'll start this one. This is a classic matchup. These two teams are no strangers to each other. Florida's been to 2 straight cups. They've won the last one. And before that, Tampa Bay was on their run. So I think the stats are the last 5 years, it's been either Tampa Bay or Florida representing the Eastern Conference. So the cup has went through Florida for 5 years running now. And I think that, we talked about this in our Western Conference, just like the stamina and the grind that Florida has went through for the last 2 years, like deep runs in the playoffs going to the Cup, has taken its toll on this roster. And why we saw so many injuries down the stretch. I think in this year's edition of the Battle of Florida, I think Tampa Bay is going to come out on top. I think they're just healthier, and their top end players have had better seasons and are playing better than Florida's top end players. And they've completely replaced Steven Stamkos with Jake Gunsel, who's fit right in, and he's really found a nice home in Tampa Bay. And you got Vasilevsky, Hedman, good defense, good balance, and also John Cooper, who is a great coach. Actually, 2 great coaches. Paul Maurice against John Cooper, Sergei Bobrovsky against Vasilevsky. This is going to be a great series. I think Tampa Bay takes it just based on them being also the healthier team and also playing at a higher level right now. So how you got this one shaping up?
This is interesting because, there's old cliche in boxing, styles make fights. And in this case, styles make for interesting series. I like a lot of your points. I think the really major concern for Florida, if they're going to push anywhere and do anything, is how healthy are they? There's a lot of smoke and cover up behind Matthew Tkachuk's injury. He hasn't played since the Four Nations, and he didn't even play the last game of the Four Nations. Right? He was on the bench, but he didn't play a lot of that game. So it's going to be interesting. But they do have a lot of guys out. Ekblad, you mentioned. They also lost quite a bit from last year's team, right? And yeah, I don't say they really replaced them, but this is still a team that's grinded a lot. Versus Tampa, who is Yeah, they lost Stamkos, but you're right. They brought in Gensel to kind of overcome that. The goaltending is probably a wash. I'd lean slightly towards Tampa in the defensive end, and they have the best player. They have the best player in the series in Kucherov, right? So, I'm with you. I like Tampa, and it's not because I'm a Leafs fan, and I really want Tampa to win because I think the Leafs have a better chance against Tampa than Florida. But I just think you can't limp into the playoffs health wise and expect all of a sudden everything's magically great again. And that's where Florida's been. They've been trying to nurture themselves for the playoffs, and they've went through 2 grueling runs the last couple seasons. One to win a Stanley Cup, but one to get to the finals and lose. And those take their toll, right? Tampa, when they did it 3 years in a row, they lost the third year, right? They just couldn't pull it out. So I think that says a lot about it, and I think I like Tampa to sneak out a victory here, and I think it'll go 7 because I don't think it's going to be an easy series. But I think Tampa may be healthy going into this series. I don't know how healthy they'll be coming out of that series. They're in for a war against Florida.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so now that we've kind of picked our first round winners, who do you think is representing the East and going to the Stanley Cup final this year?
I'm going to surprise a few people. We talked about it and said they don't have good enough goaltending, but I'm gonna pick the Carolina Hurricanes. They've been on the edge the last few seasons to get by the Rangers, to get into that mode, and nearly get there, and they came up short. But I think this year they find their way through. Brandon Moore is a great coach, grinder, and don't get me wrong, you've got John Cooper, who's a Stanley Cup winning coach. You got Craig Berube, who's won a Stanley Cup. I don't think the Capitals are Stanley Cup contenders. I think they rode a wave of Alexander Ovechkin, but I don't see them beating Carolina. And as much as Cooper and Tampa have won the Stanley Cup, they know how to get there. I like the Leafs if they play them, because the Leafs match up better against Tampa than they match against Florida. If Florida beats Tampa, the Leafs are going to lose to Florida. I just don't see them beating them. But getting Tampa, if they getting by Ottawa and then playing Tampa, they can beat Tampa. I don't think they're ready to get to the Stanley Cup. They haven't experienced the pain of losing in a conference final. They've got out of the first round once in 9 years. Having said that, if Mitch Marner is the Conn Smythe, the Conn Smythe winner, right? If they're going to win the Stanley Cup, Mitch Marner is the Conn Smythe winner. I know everybody talks about Matthews and Nylander. Marner is the key to the Toronto Maple Leafs going far in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And he's on a contract, so who knows? But I like Carolina to come out of the East.
Okay. Well, that certainly would be a surprise to many, and also to myself. But I actually have a team that you just mentioned. I think this is the Leafs' year. I really think that the fingerprints of Craig Berube, his coaching style on this roster, and I think that their defense is one of the best defenses that they're sporting going into the playoffs. And I think having missing Matthews for a good part of the season, well, I think he missed close to 20 games. It forced them to figure out their depth. And, they were always thinking of trading for a second line center. And it turned out that they had one all along, and John Tavares really having a big year. And I think, I think their depth, and also like I know I mentioned their goaltending tandem. So if one goalie has an off night, I think the other one is capable of coming in and taking the net. I think either goalie can come in and take the net and get hot, because we know that injuries are going to happen during the playoffs, and I think the Leafs are deep enough to sustain some of those injuries. And I think they'll start to ride a wave once they get past one round and then get past two rounds. And I think that wave is not going to be stopped. And they will represent the Eastern Conference in the Stanley Cup Finals this season.
You've got an all-Canadian Stanley Cup, man. And I think Canadian fans would be happy with that.
Yeah, if that were to happen, that would be guaranteed to get a Canadian team win the cup, end the drought, and it would be an epic battle for sure. Yeah. Okay, well, I enjoyed doing this with you, so thanks a lot, D-Dog, for your time.
No problem. Anytime, my friend.
And let the playoffs begin.
Absolutely. In earnest.